Johnson. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Today is Thursday, January 13th, and this is a meeting of the Academic Affairs Committee. Mr. Wexler, do we have anybody in the waiting room?
There are no attendees at this time.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll get started. We just have one agenda item today that we wanted to bring forward. Historically, we have not brought school calendars to the board subcommittees in advance of a board agenda item for adoption. Typically every January, we just bring forward the draft calendar for the next year. But this year we made a decision to make a few adjustments. And one of those adjustments is that we are providing you 3 calendars. So calendars for the next 3 years. In discussion with the administrative team and some feedback from the community, it's our understanding that families would love to have more advance notice of dates for things like graduations and vacations well in advance. And so we thought, let's do 3 years of calendars. And then starting with 2023, it would be the 25-26 calendar we would put in front of you. And so in that sense, we would have significant advance notice for our academic calendars. Hello, Dr. Allen. Welcome. And so that's the first reason why we wanted to meet today briefly. The second is that for the first time in a number of years, we have surveyed the community to get a sense of interest in different aspects of the school calendar. So I'm going to share my screen so that I can share those survey results with you and see if you have any questions about them before we look at the calendars themselves. So this was our survey, fairly straightforward. We had 700 responses on the nose, and those responses included representatives from our elementary parents, our secondary parents, and staff. So you can see there in that first question, we were asking for people to identify themselves. And as you know, some members of the community are both a parent and a staff member. And in those cases, we didn't actually disaggregate that data. We asked them to identify which they were answering the questions for. And so we had a good, solid response from the broader community. So the first question we asked after the identification question was, would you prefer that we start before or after Labor Day? That's an ongoing point of contention in many communities. And so you can see here that in orange, 63.9% of our community indicated after Labor Day as their preference, as is currently the case. And then no preference was 11.7%. As an administrative team, we've interpreted no preference as status quo heavy or majority heavy, so that if they had no preference, we added that percentage to the majority vote. So you can see here a significant 3-to-1 preference for starting after Labor Day. Okay, and that's reflected in the calendars. The second question had more debate and difference in the responses that we received. This question asked what person's point of view were regarding conferences. And we asked whether or not they preferred conferences, and I'll go back to the question so you can see the question. They had an option, 4 choices. I prefer that conferences are held in the evening and students attend full days of school in November. I prefer that they are held both during the day and in the evening, and students attend half days in the first that week in November. I prefer that they are by request only, and we have full days of school Thanksgiving week. And then I prefer that they are held during the day and students have full days off. They could choose other. And so as I go back to the responses, you'll see there was more variety in the responses. This 51.6% is a preference that we had full days off Thanksgiving week. So a very slight preference for the full days off as we currently have them. The rest of the responses, all of which are much smaller percentages, asked for some combination of flexibility with regard to school conferences. So when the numbers are this tight, the administrative team discussed what is the most family-friendly and student-friendly approach that we could take. And you'll see reflected in the calendar, we are adding 2 half-days, the Monday and Tuesday of Thanksgiving week for students, and then conferences in the afternoons. And then on the Friday prior to that Thanksgiving week, at the elementary level, we've added a half-day so that over those 3 days, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, we would have enough time to have a conference for every child in the elementary classroom. Historically, every family at the elementary level in the fall would like a conference. At the secondary level, it's a much smaller number. I'm going to come back to why we made that decision, because it would look on paper here that we should just stick with the full day off Thanksgiving week, but there's a way in which this split was helpful to us. The next question was about snow days. And so for snow days, the questions we asked were, do you like the fact that snow days have some synchronous instruction in the morning, or flexible instructional day from Friday? Do you wish they were completely free days? Or would you prefer a full day of virtual instruction, or do you have no preference? And so in the responses, once again, there was some division, but a little bit more consistency. This orange is that just over half of parents prefer that we have at least 1 or 2 days that are completely free snow days before we go to flexible instructional days. And then this 35% is some synchronous instruction in the morning, which is our current model for flexible instructional days. So when we put together the request for some flexibility in conferences and some snow days that are just snow days, that's how we ended up adding the 2 half days in Thanksgiving week. And then the last question was spring break, because there was some questions. Some districts have a partial spring break. They go Thursday, Friday, Monday in order to buy some time and end the year a little earlier, or add other opportunities during the winter for snow days. So you can see a significant percentage of our families prefer a full week of spring break. Okay, 1 in 5 did suggest the shortened spring break, but if I put in the preference that have the group that have no preference, we're actually over 70% who would prefer that we leave it as it is. Are there any questions about the survey itself? I see Amy shaking her head no.
Dr.
Shaking her head no.
I have a question.
Okay,
I'm sorry, I missed who the survey was given to again when you first began.
Yeah, so this was given to all families and staff in the district.
Okay, all families and staff.
Yes,
okay,
and they had about 2 weeks to complete it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm going to go to next year's calendar just to show you how we try to reflect the interests of the community in these new calendars. And I know you have your own copies of these, but I thought it might be easier if you just looked on screen. So you can see here at the top, we're starting after Labor Day, and we've added 2 snow days in. Now, I didn't mention in the survey, there was sort of an open-ended last question. And the feedback we received there was mainly about, can we please make sure we end by the 2nd week in June, the end of the 2nd week in June, because a lot of camps start that 3rd week. And so we're mindful of that. There's even some colleges for the seniors who start with summer sessions that week of the 20s, in June. And so we have us starting after Labor Day, each of the next 3 years. Right here on the 5th is Labor Day next September. And then we've continued to follow the same holidays we have historically followed. We have our half-day in-services to provide professional learning for the staff. The day of Halloween, allowing families to go a little earlier to prepare for that night. And then you can see here in November, we have early dismissals on the 18th that Friday just for Enfield and Erdenheim to accommodate every parent getting a conference in the elementary classroom. And then on the 21st and 22nd, half days K through 12. And that way students will not have a full week off, and teachers will have time at the secondary level to fit in those conferences that traditionally are requested. We have a much lower, again, percentage of families who request a conference in November at the secondary level. And then we've continued to be consistent in December, January, February, and March, as we have historically. We still have a half day on the day of the junior senior prom in April. And we, at the end, you can see here in June, the 12th, 13th, and 14th would be the early dismissal days for students. Typically at the secondary level, these are exam days or activity days at the elementary level. And then we've shaded in pink the 15th and 16th. These would be our snow reserve days. So that if we used 1 or 2 snow days, first the 15th would then become a student day, and then the 16th. But with 2 snow days, we do not fall into that 3rd week of June, which is what families are not interested in us carrying if we can help it. If we didn't use any snow days, our last day next year would be the 14th. If we used 1 snow day, it'd be the 15th, and 2, it would be the 16th. And then if we needed more than 2 snow days, we would go to the flexible instructional days as we had on Friday. And we have 5 of those available to us. So we think we have ample options to keep us with an absolute last date under any circumstance of the 16th of June next year.
Dr. Yannicka,
Yes.
am I correct that as of the way it reads right now, the 14th would be the last student day, but our staff would continue until the 16th?
Yes. Thank you for reminding me to point that out. So our faculty, at the top left here, you'll see they have a requirement contractually of 191 days. And students contractually, not contractually, by state law have 180 days. And so these last 2 days, if we did not use the snow days, we had a really balmy winter next year, they would still be required to report on the 15th and 16th. And we would do end of year activities with the staff, some professional learning, some end of year data analysis over those days. And then I'll go back into my email for a moment and grab the 23-24 calendar. You can see there, Labor Day is a date earlier that year. And then it's a very early end in June, numerically, relatively speaking. And then if I go back and grab 3 years out, it's a really early Labor Day on the 2nd. And then you can see, once again, we're able to finish at the latest that Friday of the 2nd full week in June. So these calendars are on the agenda for approval on Tuesday night. And just because we've surveyed, and again, we're bringing 3 forward instead of 1, Dr. Johnson and I thought it was worthwhile for us to share it with the subcommittee. Moving forward, we wouldn't do that. We would just bring them to the board agenda. But we wanted you to know what the thought that went into making these adjustments to the calendar, and just wanted to see if you had any other questions or concerns or feedback for us.
Can I just ask a question? It's really more out of curiosity. Did you get any feedback from Friday and what people thought about the flexible learning day?
Yeah, yes. Our feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Dr. Johnson, you might have more feedback than me.
I mean, I would tell you that as a parent, I thought it was positive, and I actually had a meeting with someone who has a child that goes to Springfield this week, and she was very happy with it too. So that was like 2 different perspectives. So then would you try to use up those 5 days first before using a full snow day to kind of keep it so that we would finish on the earlier end?
Well, the students, yeah, it's a good question. The feedback we got from families is they would like us to start with full snow days.
Okay.
and then go to the flexible instructional days. They would like the children to have the option to have the sleep in. Now, I will
I'm
tell you,
curious if people would change their mind after having had it on Friday. You know what I mean? Like,
it's possible by the end of this winter, they might change their mind, and we
Yeah.
could certainly make that adjustment going into the
Okay.
next year.
So,
From my perspective, I would rather say it will be a snow day if it's going to be an ice storm or something where
right.
we're expecting widespread power outages, and it's going to be a flexible instructional day if it looks like we're not going to have those kinds of issues. I'd like to nuance it a little bit more.
Right. I don't disagree.
It's a
Right.
hedge, because we could be, but I think a number of years ago where we had those ice storms,
Right.
technology just isn't going to work in a situation like that. So I don't know, Dr. Johnson, if you got any more.
These were just
feedback.
more curiosity questions.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
Yeah,
what I was
and I think, Amy, that's the conversation that we had with people. I heard some really positive feedback from students as well, particularly at the secondary level, who appreciated the 9 o'clock start because they got to sort of not rush around in the morning. We heard positive feedback by the decision being made in advance, so that everyone sort of had the opportunity, including our teachers, to be prepared for that flexible instructional day. To your point, Dr. Yannicona, about when we might use them, we've all had it happen that we don't see it coming, and then all of a sudden there is a substantial storm and we aren't as prepared. That may lead us down one path versus we know this blizzard is coming and we can plan accordingly. So I think it provides us great flexibility, and I think that's what our staff and our families have been asking for.
Yeah,
A little bit of both.
if I could provide my 2 cents, I'm a snow lover. I'm out there with the kids typically. And so I appreciate the snow day. They helped me shovel. They didn't help me last week because they were in school. They had an excuse. But I thought it worked great. I mean, it's better to call it ahead of time than have, you have a lot of schools that'll do the 2-hour delay and then they call it the last minute. But I would love if you could maintain flexibility and, if it's got to be called, call it. And if it can be used strategically, because some snow days aren't worth playing in the snow. They're just, and the kids aren't in the snow all day anyway. They get up, they do their work, and then by lunchtime, they're ready to go out and get out there. So I thought last week was great, but I support, using judgment in the future.
You mentioned that. I think it might be worth, Dr. Yannicone, for us to do a survey at the end of the winter after we've seen how many flexible instructional days, and see if there's any feedback that would inform our decision making for next year based on folks' experience this year.
I think that's a great idea. We might also want to change the term from snow day to weather emergency. I think about Upper Dublin situation in the fall. That could
That's a
have
great
very
point.
easily been ours. And so, and I think sharing, whoever's going to give this report, sharing, we have the ability as we move through next winter to make decisions on a daily basis as to whether or not it makes more sense for it to be a full day off, no tech, or the flexible instructional day. And it was very purposeful on our part to start at 9 and to finish at noon, so that there was plenty of daylight for students to sled when it's a little warmer after lunch. So get up, do your schoolwork, get a little something to eat, go out and play. Or in the case of teenagers, sleep in a little bit, get your schoolwork done, and then go back to bed if that's what you so choose. Or frankly, in Neil's case, get out there and shovel the driveway, as I wish you to do. Are there any other questions about the calendar overall? Anything in general that you were hoping to see or wondering about?
I was happy with it. I was happy to see all 3 of them up front, and I thought that the decisions, well, I mean, it looks great. I love that it took into consideration the feedback, the survey, and I personally like the calendar for selfish reasons. So there's always that.
Well, one of the pieces was, we could have, if we just went strictly by majority, a simple majority, we would have kept in November a full week off, but we couldn't have fit in the snow days then. We were that tight, we're at 180 with the students, but our PIMS coordinator, Kim Pierce, has reviewed carefully. We meet all hours and day requirements for the students, including the seniors, with these calendars. So that's important too, because it's the expectation that we're going to do that.
I just want to comment how thoughtful this process is in considering what parents are thinking and their input. There's so much reflection going on in this district that is just really impressive. I don't know if parents realize that this is definitely not the norm in all districts, that you really did the survey and see what's good for parents and really have some discussion around it and really make choices based on that. So I just wanted to just say that again.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
And I have to ditto the sentiment. Carla and I know from our past that this is not always done in other districts. So this is greatly appreciated to see the thought, the energy, and the effort and the inclusiveness of the community in making these decisions. So for that, I send a great kudos to all of you.
Thank you. We appreciate that. It's been an ongoing conversation of the administrative team to do a better job of engaging the community. So I'm glad to hear that that's
in critical decision making.
Yeah.
I think we do it. We try to include them, but I think it has been raised before that it's not, around decision making and informing sort of the practices of the district and evolving those practices to meet today's families. And so I appreciate that feedback. We also, if I could say so, Dr. Yannicone, we did talk about and meet with KidView yesterday about continuing to ensure that on those days that we are closed, or hopefully trying to find some strategies to help support them on those half days, because we do recognize that half days can be complicated for some families, that they're continuing to look at strategies they might have access to provide childcare for children who don't need it every day, but do need it with those schedule changes. So we're continuing to partner with our community supports to meet the needs of all of our families. I just wanted to add that because I think that's an important component that if community members may ask you, and I wanted you to be aware of that. We did have that discussion yesterday.
So Dr. Johnson, for my clarity, would KidsView be available for those half days? Or is that something that's still in the works?
That is still in the works. They are available for full days. So when the district is closed and they are open, they are available to take any child to have for a cost. Obviously, it's a cost program, but they are able to support families on full days. Where they're struggling with half days will depend on the availability of actually our support staff. Many of our support personnel, our aides, recess supports, food service workers are their staff for the aftercare program. And so on days when our staff have to work, it's difficult for them to then agree to provide that aftercare. But the half day is one that the support personnel are not working that day, they may be more able. So they're looking at their options. Dr. Yannicone and I offered them some options and some suggestions yesterday, trying to kind of convince them. And they were very open to partnering with us to support all of our families.
Okay, thank you for that clarity.
Absolutely. So the motion that'll be on the agenda will be to approve these 3 calendars. And then we would make these public for the community. They're going to be on the board agenda, but we'll make them public formally. Our prom committees actually have been chomping at the bit for the next 3 years to reserve their prom locations. So I've told them pending Tuesday night, you can go ahead and book these dates at the end of April there. Our next academic affairs meeting, Dr. Johnson has scheduled tentatively, if it works for all of you, for Monday, February 7th at, is it 5 p.m.? 5 p.m. And at that meeting, she will have done a ton of data analysis between the end of January and February 7th, because we are currently in the midst of our mid-year assessments across the K-8 schools for STAR Reading and STAR Math. And so you may or may not recall that in September, Damien presented sort of where we were by the end of last school year and the impact the pandemic was having on grade level proficiency for our students. So she will be providing an update based on our mid-year assessment data that is in the process of being gathered right now. So that's our next meeting, and that will be an important one. And then we'll want to get some feedback from you about what aspects of that data report do you think are worthwhile to include in a public meeting. Since the following Tuesday, the 15th of February, will be our next board meeting after Tuesday. So, and so we just want to double check because it's an important meeting. There's a lot of information that is going to be shared with you, and just want to make sure that that day and time work for the 4 of you. If not, we'll move it.
Works for me. Works for me.
It works for me also.
I already put it on my calendar, as you were saying.
Okay, great. Carla, you're good?
Carla.
All right,
We
thank you.
appreciate your support.
Is there anything else that you were hoping that we would be bringing to you at a future academic affairs meeting? Any questions out there that you want us to work on? Okay. All right, so then the next meeting will be focused on mid-year assessment data. And which of you would you like me to add to the board agenda? We'll be providing the report on this committee meeting.
I'll take the lead on that.
Okay, Dr. Atwood, sounds
Okay.
good.
Mhm. And if you could be so kind to send me the documents that you shared today, just for my refreshment.
Yes, absolutely. Happy
Okay,
to do
great.
that.
All right, thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Oh, I apologize. We have one attendee. Does the attendee have any questions for the panel? This would be the public comment portion. Okay.
We
Mr.
have
White-
turned on the raised hand feature, so if an attendee would like to make a public comment, please use that feature now. There are currently no attendees.
Okay, very good. All right, well, then that's all we had for you tonight. I apologize that there wasn't an official board agenda. I'll make sure that we get that corrected moving forward, but you have all the information you need for the report on Tuesday night, Dr. Allen, other than me sharing the documents with you.
Yes, I do. And if I have any questions, you know I'm going to reach out to you.
Sounds good. You know where to
Okay,
find me.
thank you.
All
Thank
right,
you.
thank you very much.
Thank you all. We appreciate it.
Okay, bye-bye,
Have a
everybody.
great
Thank you,
evening.
everybody. Good
Thank
night.
you. Have a
Next
great
week.
weekend.